So you're an activist and you have a cause that you really care about, and your passion is infectious. So infectious that a moment of you snapping back at an opponent goes viral online, and you pick up loads of followers, and your comment section is filled with people telling you how right on you are. Sure, there are some haters, but mainly everyone is saying how right you are, how great you are, and how important a role you have in leading this movement. You organize a protest. It's got record attendance. You're leading the chants with a megaphone at the front. There's huge crowds behind you. You're featured in a magazine. A designer even offers to dress you to attend a fancy event. And then your prime minister or your president offers to meet with you. And you go and you have your photo taken outside Downing Street, outside the White House. And the press officer puts out a statement that the president met with you and they agree with what you've got to say. And nothing changes. So often, despite huge activist movements, we're not seeing the progress we want to see in our world. In 2019, I co-authored a book about activism, and we interviewed hundreds of activists. But even since then, the world's changed a lot. It's pretty unrecognizable. We've had the huge movement for Black Lives following the murder of George Floyd. We've had the biggest ever climate protests, record-breaking protests to free Palestine. But 57% of Americans think that race relations are getting worse. We are at 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels in terms of global warming, and we're set to hit 1.5 degrees by 2030. We are no closer to achieving peace in the Middle East. So what is the disconnect between these huge social uprisings and this passion and this energy and the fact that we're not seeing the change that we want to see? Well, I've been working with activists for over a decade, and I've got a few lessons that I've learned along the way. So today I'm going to talk about how we find community, how we build community, and a couple of the traps that I think some activists are falling into, which is why some of the movements aren't achieving the kind of progress that they would hope to see. When it comes to finding community, most people who find a cause come to that cause because they are really passionate about it. Why are they passionate about it? Because something's happened to them, or something's happened to their family member. And that's important because they can speak from lived experience. But what happens is that they then, with this passion, with this motivation, go and set something up. Every year in the UK, about 5,000 new charities are started and 5,000 close. So what's that telling us about what people are doing? They're going off, they're starting something, rather than looking at what already exists, looking at what's already out there, who's already working on this. So rather than venturing out on my own, where could I add my passion rather than creating something new? And my advice would be, see what else is out there and then see where you can apply your skills. Because skills as well as passion are desperately needed in causes. So whether you're a nurse, you're an engineer, you're great at TikTok, you're a really good listener, all of these things are so useful. Find your community, add your skills. And bear in mind that not every activist has got to be that frontline person getting arrested and putting their life on the line. I interviewed Kumi Naidoo about when he was executive director of Greenpeace. And he said there was one time he went out and occupied an oil rig and got arrested. And it was a big moment. There was a lot of awareness created. But he said, yeah, sure, my role on that day was important. What else was important was the people who filmed the moment so that people knew it existed. The lawyers who came and advocated for us when we were in custody. The person who drove the boat, because none of that was happening if someone wasn't able to steer the boat that day. All of these skills were needed for this moment. So whatever you can do, bring those skills and dedicate them in a focused way. And I really think that's how we can make more of a focused difference rather than just noise. So you've found your community, you're applying your skills. How do we build this community? Well, the first thing I would say is to look around and go, who isn't here? Where are the people from this ethnic group? Where are the people from this socioeconomic background? Where are the people who might have a disability? Is our movement inclusive? Is our movement welcoming? Why do some people feel that actually this space isn't the place for them? Because if we're building movements that don't include people regardless of race, religion, gender identity, disability, our movements will be sorely lacking. And the second thing that I'd say when it comes to building community, which I admit is more controversial, is look for allies in unlikely places. A lot of activist movements will say, well, these people don't belong in our movement. We couldn't possibly work with these people. And I understand why. People feel that, actually those people, their values don't align with ours. But often the people who are in power, they don't agree with you right now. You might not like them, but it's the people in power that you need to convince. It's the people in power who need to be persuaded. There's also, everything in life is yin and yang. And activism is very much the same. Sometimes opposing forces are actually very complementary. And I look at the climate movement, for example. Where is the majority of research and development of renewables happening? It's by the big energy companies. And now no one wants to talk about this, but all of this important technological development is not happening in government. It's not happening in the majority of climate charities. And God bless the activists out in the street, but they're not the ones developing the technology. And so if we're not involving big energy companies, we're missing out on really, really important innovation and research. And when it comes to climate change, we don't have time to be picky. We need everybody. So I would say find your community, bring your skills, and build that community as widely as you can. Everyone should be welcome, because if you're going to make a difference, you're going to need everyone behind you. So what about some of these traps that activists fall into that are actually, I think, holding back a number of the big movements that we're seeing at the moment? Number one, slacktivism. Slacktivism is activism that's happening online, and I think actually can be not only unproductive, but counterproductive. Because when we're sitting there doom scrolling and resharing and snapping back in the comments section and getting into it, we're actually kidding ourselves that we're making a difference. We're getting these dopamine hits and we're feeling good about ourselves. The average person is spending 2.5 hours a day on social media, but none of that is really making a difference other than putting some pixels out on the internet. Imagine if we respent that 2.5 hours actually doing something in the real world, taking our activism offline. All of those posts you see about, this is what you can do to make a difference. What if people actually did that rather than just resharing it on Instagram? We could do so much more. Please don't fall into the trap of thinking that slacktivism is actually activism. So secondly is something that I call pure think, which it's a bit like groupthink, but I think it's a bit more pernicious. And it's saying that only people who think a certain way and are a certain way are welcome. And if you think like this, then you are problematic. Well, I tell you what, there is not a single person I've met that if you don't probe them hard enough, have some kind of problematic view on something. And actually, rather than clapping back at people and telling them how wrong they are, we should be saying, actually, okay, let's have a dialogue. Let's lean into this moment, because actually you have skills, you have energy, you have ability. You could roll your sleeves up and be part of this. And every time that someone claps back at somebody, for every person who goes, yeah, right on, there's someone who goes, I don't know if I can ask a question now. I might, oh gosh, maybe I don't think I'm welcome here. And with activism, we haven't got time for that. We can't afford it. We need to be welcoming and inviting of people and invite them into dialogue, invite them into listen to them. And that's how we change minds, that's how we win hearts, and that's how we build movements. And the final trap that I think people fall into, which I tried to think of a kind of intellectual way to phrase this, but the best I came up with was try not to be flipping annoying. We all, I think, are aware of the dangers of violent protests. And actually, when you look at the data of uprisings, non-violent uprisings are twice as likely to succeed as violent uprisings when it comes to overthrowing governments and so on. And I would say with irritation factors, it's a bit like slacktivism. Aggravation, sure, it creates awareness. But with our phones constantly pumping us information, awareness is rarely the issue. It's actually making people feel that this matters to them. It's making them go, oh, actually, that's important. I should do something, rather than just knowing the issue exists. And personally, I feel that when well-meaning protesters glue themselves to electric forms of transport and prevent people getting home to their families, I don't think a lot of people are going, yeah, I'm going to do something for climate change. I think that people who are intellectually on side get emotionally switched off. And I think that that's a real danger that we're facing at the moment, is rather than creating movements that people want to join, we're creating movements that people step away from. And we need people to be focusing on bending the moral arc towards justice. Because there is no guarantee that any of these rights and freedoms that are so hard fought will last forever. The women's marches, how big and inspiring were they? Meanwhile, Roe versus Wade is getting rolled back. We can't take any of the noise as a sign that things are changing. So I want you to imagine that you're an activist and you spend a little bit of time online and your posts get a couple of likes, but actually you're rolling your sleeves up, doing unglamorous work. And if you organize a protest, there'd probably be more police officers than protesters because you're not a big group, but you're a focused group and you know what you're doing. And when the government invites you to go and meet with them, yeah, it's not at Downing Street, it's not at the White House. It's in a really gloomy back corridor in a really kind of dank office and the projector doesn't really work. But you're there with your data and your knowledge and your ideas and you're listened to. And the bill gets passed, the law gets changed, the product gets recalled. You've made a difference. Thank you.